Welcome to the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast, the bi-weekly show that brings you the best of powerlifting in Canada. Our three co-hosts include Ryan Stint, holder of the heaviest equipped squat and total in Canada, as well as owner of Unparalleled Training Center and co-owner of Inner Strength Products. Steve Cassioli, IPF world record holder and medalist, the third strongest classic lifter in Canadian history, and owner of Cassioli Strength and Conditioning. Lastly, Avi Silverberg, world team coach and world bench press medalist, owner of PursuitOfStrength.com, a site dedicated to coaching and education for powerlifters. Today's episode starts right now.
Season 2 of the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast is brought to you by LVD Fitness. LVD Fitness is a powerlifting apparel brand that donates 1 month of clean water to a child in need for every item sold. Follow them on Instagram and Facebook at LVD Fitness to join the movement.
Sport that you really have to love and want to excel at if you want to do good. It's not one of those things you're going to go to the gym once a week and do awesome. It's not what happens on the platform. It's what happens the months and months of training before you hit the platform that counts.
Hello and welcome to the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast, Season 2, Episode 2. We got a fantastic guest lineup for you today. Stef Puddicome will tell you a little bit about her background and who she is as an athlete in just a second here. But we want to thank everybody for joining us on our podcast, supporting the podcast. Don't forget to go into whatever your favorite podcasting app is, wherever you're listening to us, and rate us, leave a comment, and definitely subscribe. Help us out on our end. And for those of you who don't follow Steve Cassioli on Snapchat, I gotta say, he's putting out some quality Snapchats these days. Fantastic work, Steve.
Thank you.
That's all you have to say for yourself.
If you want to follow me on Snapchat, you can follow me at Steven.Cassioli.
And we got Ryan, who still doesn't have Snapchat, but it's all good. We're gonna wait for that day, and we'll make the big announcement when Ryan joins Snapchat in the near future. Anyways, I think we should just roll. We got some great content in this podcast here today, and so we want to leave as much time for that as possible. But before we get into our interview with Stef, we are going to continue with the Coast to Coast bi-weekly powerlifting wrap-up.
All right, so this week in our news segment, I'm going to be covering the BCPA Winter Open results. This event happened at the Richmond Oval, the same venue as the Commonwealth Championships were at. It was a very similar layout. It was run very well. And so a few of the lifters that won Best Lifter, the first female was 63-kilogram open lifter Becky Loretson, the 385 Wilks score, and male Jason Bell with a 428 Wilks score. He was a 105-kilogram open lifter. There was also Special Olympics going on, and I think there was about 40 to 50 competitors total in the full powerlifting and the push-pull, which was very interesting. What do you have for us, Ryan?
Yeah, this past week we had the Classic World Team announced for the CPU, so cover some of that. This year also, if you weren't aware, at the AGM this year, they decided to implement a minimum Wilks score for our open classic team. So women have a minimum 390 Wilks and men have a minimum of 440 Wilks. So a little bit of a change this year for that. Some athletes won their class at nationals but weren't able to hit the qualifying Wilks. And I think it's it's good and bad. It's good that we are forcing our not forcing, but we're going to send a little higher quality team to Worlds, and because we have such a very competitive team at Classic Worlds. I think last year, Avi, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think both of our open teams we got 5th place, right?
Correct.
So this year we might be. I would love to see us push into 4th, and maybe 3rd if we can really push hard. But some excellent lifters this year going. Obviously on the women's side, Marie Hitti at 57. The only woman so far in Canada to have Wilks 500 Classic. And beyond that, Rhonda Wong at 47, Joanna Reiber at 52, Jess Benedetto at 57, Teresa Parsons at 63, Rhea Stinn at 82, and Haley Kosniuk at 84 plus. And she was a monster at nationals. I think she squats somewhere in the I'm just going to say in kilos. I think it was 242 kilos, if I'm not mistaken, which is ridiculous. And on the men's side, also 440 Wilks. So we had I think we had one weight class that didn't meet that qualifier. So on the low end, we got on the light side, we have Steve Cassioli, just being light. He's just light. He's small, but he's a powerhouse. 66. Then Connor Lutz at 74, Mark Wasson 83, Nick Roberts at 93, Bryce Krawchuk at 105, Eric Wills at 120, and then two supers going, which is awesome, Kelly Branton and Brad Kleefeld. So it's just, it's very cool to see. We have full teams, big reserve lists, so I really hope that, if someone does have to back out, which may happen, I hope someone backs out with enough time that we can get a reserve into that position so we have full teams going. So, Avi, what are you going to talk about?
Well, first and foremost, if you want to be featured on the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast, make sure you're hashtagging Canadian Powerlifting Podcast on all your Insta videos. So this week I am going to cover the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast hashtag, and we're going to kick it off with a couple of Alberta men deadlifting. Bryce Krawchuk, one of our Team Canada members, as Ryan said, just switched to sumo deadlifting. I believe he is going to make the switch full-time. Looks like he's committing to the style. And for those of you who don't know Bryce, he pulled a world record at North Americans on the deadlift conventional. It has since been broken, but notwithstanding, still a very strong puller. And in Instagram land this week, he was sumo pulling 275 kilos for 6 reps. And another Alberta boy, Brody Labelt, who we've mentioned before on the podcast, pulling 302.5 for 4 reps. Brody's been dealing with some injuries in the past year and a half. It's good to see that he's on the mend and looking healthy. We also have Mimi Frank, who hashtagged the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast, benching 80 kilos for 4 singles, and I believe she's a 63-kilo athlete. Mimi took my powerlifting workshop this past weekend. I was in Edmonton doing a little bit of a technique seminar, and I finally just put 2 and 2 together because Mimi's been commenting on my Instagram the last few weeks, and I saw her at the workshop, and I said, this is this insane person who has this crazy bench technique and crazy numbers. So, and that's all we got for the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast hashtag. I know that we want to get that up rolling again, so please do so, and we're more than happy to feature you. And that's your coast-to-coast, bi-weekly powerlifting wrap-up.
All right, this week on the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast, we have our special guest, Stef Puddicome from Newfoundland. She's a fairly new lifter in the sport. I think she started lifting in about 2013, 2012, but she's also very well accomplished. She's competed at and medaled twice at Open Classic Worlds, both in South Africa and last year in Finland. And she's also been lifting equipped now a little bit, and she'll be attending some of the equipped events this year internationally. She's a fantastic lifter. She's coached by none other than Tom Keane. And I think she has a lot of interesting stuff to talk about, and it was a really good discussion on cutting weight and making weight, how her nationals went, and some of her experiences at the Arnold. So really good discussion with Stef today, and hopefully really entertaining listening.
So without further ado, Stef Puddicome. This week on the podcast, we have Stef Puddicome. We're so excited to have you with us, Stef. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Easter weekend, so that means that you're doing a lot of chocolate, wine, all of the above?
All of the above, yes.
That's fantastic. So Stef's joining us from St. John's, Newfoundland, and trains with quite a good training crew, Tom Keane being one of them. And Tom was on our Season 1 of podcasts, who was one of our guests, one of our early guests. And Tom actually does a lot of your coaching and programming, is that right?
Yes, yeah. Tom is my coach and my main training partner as well.
And can you maybe talk a little bit about that relationship a little bit in terms of Tom taking on your programming? And I know that he's done some incredible work with you over the last few years since you got involved in the sport. And can you tell us kind of how that's evolved, your training since you've gotten involved in the sport, and then kind of where you are now?
Yeah, for sure. So I actually I think my first competition may have been in June 2013, and I was more a bikini model when I did my first powerlifting meet, and I wasn't in contact with Tom at all then. He was running the meet, so I met him at the meet. He actually pulled a 621-pound deadlift at that meet, so I was like, wow, that was pretty cool. So I messaged him a little while after that and asked him to take me on, and he basically wrote me back. I was just asking his fees and all that good stuff, and he wrote me back and said, when you win nationals, buy me pizza. And I was like, okay. When I win nationals, that sounds good. So, since then I've actually had a solid training program. I mean, the first session with him, it was interesting. He asked me who showed me how to squat. I didn't know how to squat. I didn't know how to deadlift. So, I've learned quite a bit in the last 2 years working with him.
Now, it's quite interesting that you say that you come from a bikini background, because there's actually a number of female athletes who are getting involved in the sport and have seen a lot of great success in powerlifting coming from a bikini background. You obviously being one of them. But can you talk a little bit about, when you're working with Tom? Because if you listen to season 1 of our podcast, we talked about how Tom is one of the technicians in the sports, and all of his athletes that he's ever coached has been very, very technical in the execution of their lifts. Can you talk about maybe that transition into powerlifting, and maybe talk about the technique that underlies powerlifting training? Like, of course, you squatted and benched before and deadlifted before in your previous pursuit, bikini pursuits, but it is a lot of a different technique. It is a lot of different techniques. So can you talk a little bit maybe about that evolution of maybe your mindset when it comes to technique, or some of the things you've had to work on?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess in bikini training, I did a lot of hypertrophy workouts, so shoulder complexes, bicep complexes, was working on all the small muscle groups that you need developed. And then I kind of touched on powerlifting a little bit while I was doing bikini, but I had no idea what I was doing. I would squat, would get up to a max lift, I'd fail it, would try it 1 or 2 more times, I'd fail it again a few more times, and then call it a day. I was failing lifts every single session that I trained.
Wow.
And it was when I started working with Tom, the first session, I was like crawling on the floor because I was doing volume, and I wasn't used to squatting anything more than 2 reps at a time. So it was quite different to have a training plan and have sets of 5 and 6 and a set of 8. I was like, oh my, I'm gonna have a heart attack. So it was different. It was a totally different focus. I mean, I wasn't focusing on what my front delts looked like anymore. I was kind of trying to build strength and not really kind of care what the body looked like.
Sure, and of course you still have amazing front delts and
thank you.
Biceps and triceps. But
the triceps are totally lacking. That's why I can't bench. Okay,
yeah,
perfect.
I was going to say, Steph, so can you tell us a little bit about your experience this year at Nationals, and how did you find it competing twice in the one meet?
I guess just to first touch on Nationals, Nationals was horrible for me this year. I guess I can't really find any other way to sugarcoat it.
Now, this is your second Nationals, right? Or third Nationals.
This is my third, yeah.
And so this Nationals and last Nationals, you decided to compete in both Classic and Equipped.
Yeah.
This year, so that's really cool. This year, it just so happened that the schedule was very close together in terms of your Classic and your Equipped competition. So can you talk a little bit about your approach just as Steve said, your approach going into Nationals and competing on both those days, and what was that like, and how come you said it was shitty this year?
Well, I guess it was shitty this year. It didn't go quite as we wanted it. I had a pretty awful weight cut, missed weight by 0.2. So lifting Classic, I kind of was lifting as a 47 lifter, but in the 52 class, so I wasn't really able to do my full potential as a 52 lifter. The total I got was less than I would do on a easy training day for doubles and triples. But I mean, we were still able to pull together a good meet after a terrible cut and cutting a lot of weight. So it was all right. And I guess to compete a few days later, I didn't really find it that bad. And I think it was because Equipped was second. If Raw had been the second one, I don't think I would have been able to do it. But yeah, competing twice is awesome. You kind of get any nerves out of the way, and then you're kind of amped to get back out there. And especially where I didn't do as I had planned on doing, the first day in Classic, I wanted to get back out there and do a bit better in gear.
Did missing the weight there affect you at all, like mentally, or are you kind of more pumped to get into it for the equip there?
On the day I lifted Classic, I was definitely not pumped. I was like crawling to the weigh-in room, but it didn't really affect me mentally that much. Like, I knew that I was going to have a pretty hard day on my hands after cutting, almost 5 kilos and missing weight. So we just worked with what we had to work with at the time, pulled it together, and got out there and did what we could. Over the past few years, growing as an athlete and having a bit of experience, I really panic when stuff doesn't go quite as we had hoped it was going to go. Mm-hmm. So you kind of just got to deal with what you got.
Yeah, it seems like you held it together like quite well, anyways.
So you you have quite experience cutting weight. You've done it for a number of competitions, a number of big cuts. What would you? I know you didn't make it this time, but what was the reason? Do you think? Do you think it was just not starting early enough? Was it?
Christmas. Nationals being closer, I guess, this year to Christmas. No, that wasn't the main reason. I guess, so my coach actually advised me not to cut for this meet, and we were going to go in and probably cut for Texas, one of the bigger meets, but there was a number of reasons why I wanted to cut down to 47. I was a bit heavier than I normally am when I start cutting, and I don't know if it was the travel that affected me or not, but like when we landed, I was 0.8 of a kilo heavier than when we had left home, and I was just in striking range as it was. I had enough to cut as it was, so I think that like just kind of made it a little bit impossible to do.
And this was your first time not making weight for a competition, is that right?
Yeah, it was, which I guess like I learned a lot from it. I thought before this I was pretty much Superwoman, and I used to say to Tom, like, oh, whatever, man, I can sweat off 6 kilos if I have to. I got this. But there's just a certain point when your body just doesn't sweat anymore. Mm-hmm. So that's the point I got to. I think we were like 5 or 6 hours that morning in saunas and hot baths, and I lost 0.02 in that whole time frame. Wow. So the first like 3.5 kilos fell off. I was feeling awesome, and then after 4 kilos, it kind of stopped coming off. So it's good to know, like I know now exactly where I have to be and that my body has limits. So yeah, I guess I could have just been a little bit smaller when I started.
Not to make light of it, but it's better that it happened at nationals where you could still lift and not at an international event where you couldn't, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And in terms of going back to competing 2 days later in the equipped, was that, I know that in the classic there was a little bit of competition in terms of that top spot. There was a couple other ladies who were in the mix in terms of the podium spots. And maybe you want to talk about that in terms of the competition in the classic. But then I know that a couple days later there wasn't really as much competition in the equipped.
Right.
And so, it didn't really matter truly if you made weight or not, and what the competitiveness was, because as long as you made a lift in the equipped, you were going to come out on top that day, because you are a fantastic equipped lifter as well. So can you talk a little bit about maybe the difference between the two? One being, okay, you didn't make weight, you still got to compete, you still want to win and do really well, and then a couple days later, less stress, and you're not worried about weight, and it's not as competitive. So what's kind of the difference between those two competitions? Maybe you can talk about that.
Normally I like the competitive side of it. I love going head to head with somebody, but the day that I lifted Classic, I pretty much sweat off 5 kilos. I was nowhere near the top of my game. My first warm up felt like it was going to crush me. I was starting to cramp. So I guess if everything had been in line, like I would love going head to head with someone like that, but that day it kind of just wasn't my day. And then my back actually came out before it deadlifts. I think it was that awful third grind squat. Anyways, going into deadlifts,
for those of you who don't know, Stef is an absolute. I've seen Stef grind some lifts that are just unbelievable. Squat, bench, deadlift. It doesn't. Sometimes I'm just like, I can't believe she's putting this on the bar, and then you actually do it, and it's just this most epic grind. It's like something to see, to be honest. It's really awesome.
Yeah.
So you feel like that actually had an implication on kind of the back end?
It did, yeah. So the chiropractor there tried to kind of haul me back in place for deadlifts, but I mean, it wasn't there. There was, I think I done the rep that I missed for easy triples in the gym, and it just like absolutely didn't budge off the floor that day. So yeah, so normally I do like competition. That day was a little bit different. I would have liked actually the equip day to actually have some head-to-head competition. So I didn't. So, and I still actually wasn't feeling great. My back was still in pretty bad shape that day. So we just went in.
This was 2 days later on the equipped.
2 days later, so we just went in with the hopes of getting a few national records and walking away with a 9 for 9 day, and we did that. So it was pretty good.
So at the end of the day, you placed second in the classic, and you placed first in the equip. Still pretty unbelievable to say that you can come on a podium, given that sort of adversity. And then 2 days later, sounds like dealing with a little bit of a nagging injury, coming out on top on the equip. So that's pretty cool to say. Just going back to the weight cuts, and you said you've kind of learned a lot from your weight cutting and you know, some of maybe the do's and don'ts, especially after nationals. What would you say are kind of your 3 do's and 3 don'ts when you're cutting weight? You know, there's a lot of people, in fact, I just gave a workshop this past weekend, and a lot of the female athletes were a couple of the female athletes were coming up to me and saying, I'm kind of in between this class right now. Like, what should I do? Should I, should I go up? Should I cut? What should I do? So what are kind of your 3 do's and your 3 don'ts?
I guess one of my biggest don'ts would be, if it's your first powerlifting meet, absolutely do not cut weight. Go in and have some fun, see what your body's capable of doing. And another one, I mean, I see people cutting all the time for not even a provincial meet, just like a local meet. They're cutting like 5 kilos because they want to win their class. Like, I wouldn't recommend cutting unless it's for something big. You have something big on the line, a national record, a spot on the world team, the world podium, something like that. Because it's hard on your body, it's hard on your strength. It takes a long time for your body to bounce back after a big cut. I wouldn't recommend doing a weight cut alone either. That would be the third one. I mean, at nationals, I was like crawling on the floor trying to cut weight. So it's not very safe to do by yourself. A few do's, I guess. The major one would be to learn from somebody who's actually done it before, not an Instagram hero who says,
Sure.
Like I'm 1 kilo over and 2 weeks out, I'm loading 12 liters of water. Like, that's not a weight cut. Like, learn from somebody who's actually done it before. Talk to somebody and know that your lifts are going to feel totally different. Your body's going to feel totally different after being that dehydrated. Yeah, so learn from someone who's done it. Consult people that actually know, and try to not do it if at all possible. Yeah,
I mean, it's something that I think is a little bit glorified in our sport, right? Like, you want to, powerlifting is already this extreme sport, right? And, you have these extreme personalities, and with that, cutting is this kind of extreme process as well. And so you kind of get these extreme personalities doing these extreme cuts, and sometimes it's not really the best decision from a tactical standpoint. It's like, if you cut the weight and you do make your lower body weight class, it's like, well, are you actually even going to be competitive in that class? Or is like your Wilks even going to be better? Or like, what's on the line here? Like, are you do you have, and then looking at the competition schedule, it's like, do you have 2 or 3 meets that are within a close time period? And if you do, you don't want to be cutting for every single one of those competitions.
No.
Because that is going to take a toll on the body, like you said. So because of what happened at nationals, you actually had to win your spot to guarantee your place on the classic world team. And the final selections just came out, and it was named that this year you're not going to be joining us on the classic world team. Although the last 2 years you did make the team, you did travel internationally on those teams, and you did quite well in terms of your placings. You medaled on both those occasions. But now you actually have an opportunity, because you did do the equipped and you won the equipped, to go to the equipped worlds. And so you're going to be, the team hasn't been announced yet, but you will be making the equipped powerlifting world championship. So how is your training now in terms of having that on your radar? What are you kind of focusing on? What are you really gearing up for? Are you going to go 52? Are you going to go 47 for that event? What are your goals for that meet?
Yeah, so I guess it's a totally different kind of training thing that we're following now. I've never been able to give equipped the attention that it deserves, and in all honesty, we haven't really trained equipped much at all. Maybe like twice before a meet, so I've never been in tight gear. In the warm-up room at Nationals, we were kind of giggling. Everybody was like jimmying themselves in these suits, and I kind of just jumped in my suit that was 5 sizes too big, like a singlet. So now we're able to kind of give it, I guess it wasn't exactly what we wanted, but it sort of can turn into a good thing because we're able to give it the attention that it deserves. So since the Arnolds, we've been wrapping a few times a week, and I'm really learning how to use the equipment. And I think, with any luck, my coach says anyways, within the next 12 months, he thinks that I can probably wilks around 580 or 600.
Wow.
So we're going in as a big 52, and we'll go from there. I'm not cutting any weights.
Okay, wow. So you're going to go 52 for the world team there, and that's honestly unbelievable to hear that you can actually use the equipment with such with not as much practice as someone would think that you would need to become so proficient at the gear. It's amazing that you can actually get the kilos out of the gear without training in the gear so early on. I mean, it's incredible to hear, and now that I'm hearing it from you, it sounds like you got a ton of potential in the tank with your
that's awesome.
lifting.
I was gonna throw in a few words there because I was in the wraps and thrown the suit a few times, and I mean, it seems like you're getting a lot more carryover than I have the past only the couple times that you've tried the gear on, right? So it seems like you have a lot of potential there for sure.
I would say, honestly, before every meet, maybe 2 wrap sessions, and I was in a suit once, and a super loose suit, one that I could put straps up myself. So hopefully, with a solid training block and not cutting weights. So I normally every 2 or 3 months I have a meet come, so I'll cut weight and go back up. Whenever I start to get strong, I'll cut again. So we're going to have a full off season at a full 52 and get to use the equipment and see what we can do with it, I guess.
So are you going to just solely be focusing on the equip lifting a lot more now then?
Yeah, I guess without Texas on the forefront now, we're going to concentrate for North Americans at the end of August and see what we can do there.
I really enjoyed watching the Arnold. As much as I enjoyed watching you, I kind of watched Blaine a little bit more. But you did follow him, right? So that was pretty awesome. I mean, not many people get to say they followed Blaine some they're squatting. So
it was so weird, actually. In the warm-up room, there was 800 pounds on the bars for squat warm-ups, and we had to strip everything off so I could warm up next to Blaine. It was quite strange, and I guess even for Tom wrapping my knees, it was hard for him to know when to start wrapping because they had to take off 20 reds aside, and because I would always follow him. I was the first lifter, and he was obviously the last one in the same flight. It was incredible. I got to actually watch all his lifts too from right on deck or wherever I was. It was amazing.
Was this your first experience at a venue like this?
It was my first Arnold's, and I watched it last year just on live stream, and I thought it looked pretty cool, but being there is a completely different experience. They don't turn the music off when you go out on the platform. It's like a showcase. Everybody's so pumped up. The room was packed and I'm assuming because of the people that were lifting in the flight that I was in. Blaine was in the flight, so the house was packed from wall to wall. All the chairs were full. It was incredible. It was such a cool event to lift at.
Hey, so this is actually really interesting. So I think, Ryan, have you lifted in the same flight as Blaine?
He lifted in a different flight than me in Puerto Rico, and I don't think he was in Norway. So I don't think I've actually lifted with him.
I think Steph has one powerlifting notch ahead of you here now that she's lifting the same flight as Blaine. Yeah. That's pretty crazy to hear that they put all of the equipped lifters there in one flight, and you were actually lifting in Blaine's flight there. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. I mean, I think it was 13 days after Nationals. So again, I didn't have very much time to peak or do anything in between the 2 meets.
Oh, so I was going to say, from Nationals there, how'd you do in terms of your numbers?
At Nationals, I squat 155. At the Arnolds, I squat 165. I think I benched 90 at Nationals and 97.5 at Arnolds, and I pulled 165 at Nationals and 175 at Arnolds. So I did quite a bit better at Arnolds.
That's awesome. In 2 weeks' time as well, right? Just coming off of that, the 2 meets there, that's pretty impressive.
My Nationals Wilks, I think, was 508 or 510 or something like that anyways, and Arnold's was 541. So it was quite a bit better. We had a little bit of time in between.
Yeah.
And it was like a show. So it was, stress-free. My body wasn't feeling quite as bad as it was feeling at nationals, so it was good.
So you mentioned that you Wilks 541, which is very impressive. It's actually the 5th highest female equipped Wilks of all time in Canada.
It is.
That's
it
very
is.
impressive.
So yeah. So I guess everything that happened at nationals and not making the Texas team, it kind of just got us thinking that there's a little bit of a potential there that we can kind of try to see what we can do with. So that's where we're going to go from here.
So here we are, Stef. Like you got in the sport a couple years ago, and now you've competed at 2 World Championships, Classic World Championships. You competed at the Arnolds. You're gearing up for your first Equipped World Championships and North Americans, and you've had all these meets under your belt that not a lot of lifters who have such a short time frame in the sport have the opportunity. You've really gone the sport. You're not a flash in the pan, so to speak. You've really stuck with it, got a good coach. And you've committed to powerlifting training and have really seen a lot of success. And with that success, I'm sure that outside of learning, weight cutting and things like that, you've learned a number of other things from, a mental perspective, because it does change as you compete and your mindset shifts. And when you talk to somebody who's just getting into the sport, and when you talk to somebody like Ryan, who's being in the sport, or somebody else,
So old.
so old like Ryan, your perspective shifts, and it's a little bit more of a mature mindset, I guess. And everybody has to go through that. But can you tell us a little bit about that mental game, so to speak, that's evolved for you over the years? Because I remember working with you at your first Worlds, and I remember now kind of seeing you at Nationals and Worlds last year, and obviously talking to you offline as well. That there has been some changes. So what's kind of gone on in that regard?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think as a lifter, the more experience and platform time that you get, kind of the better you get at that stuff. I've always been a competitor, but I guess, Abby, you can even attest to, in South Africa, I was like a basket case. I was running around and panicking about everything. I threw open my mouth like 10 times. I was crying, and I don't know. It was just a complete and utter. It was crazy. I panicked over everything. My openers, I was yelling at people. Like, it was just awful. So I think you get to the point where you've done it so much, and you're actually I guess you know your own capabilities, and you know what your body can do, and you just get, I guess, less panicked. And that's kind of how I am now. So I know there's going to be a bunch of things that I can't control on the day of a meet, and the things that you can't control, you just let them go and do what you can that day. And I do. It's all about experience. So even at the local meets, yeah.
I love how you say that, because a lot of people, and we've said this on the podcast before, where a lot of people getting into the sport, or even people who have been in the sport, they've competed a couple times, but then they wait so long to compete again. And what you've done, and I think over your career, that's okay. You compete less frequently, but when you are starting out, the more times you compete, the better, because you're just gonna get better at that skill of competing and dealing with the emotions and being nervous and lifting in front of people and lifting in front of judges. And then it's very hard to translate your training numbers into competition numbers early on because of those emotions and because of the skill of competing isn't really there yet. But now you're starting to see some of your best numbers on the competition platform,
yeah.
Equipped at the Arnolds, like you were just saying. It's like I'm able to actually realize my strength potential because I'm not nervous anymore, and I'm just out there having fun, and it's just another day sort of thing.
And then any of the nerves that I kind of have now, I can use them to my advantage rather than panicking and crying and throwing up. I remember the first Easterns Tom and I went to together. It was in PEI, and I forgot my wrist wraps. And the night before, I realized I forgot my wrist wraps, and it was like the biggest deal in the world. I started to cry that I didn't have my wrist wraps, and nobody else's would be the same. Now, my God, if I forgot my squat shoes, I'd be okay. Like you just learn to adapt to things that are out of your control that day.
So I just want to go back to your bikini background. Like you obviously used to standing on stage and being in front of people and stuff like that. Is it different? Like is this arena of powerlifting different? Like were you not able to kind of take some of the learnings from bikini and apply it into powerlifting, or is this just powerlifting, kind of a unique context where you have to learn that skill of competing just by doing more powerlifting?
I think the only thing that I translated over was to always have lip gloss. Other than that, The bikini didn't really translate over that much at all. To be honest, it wasn't the same type of mental game. You kind of just had to walk out and strut your stuff. You didn't have to really, I guess, perform to any level. You just walked out and you already did all the work.
Except for the lip gloss. That's so funny because I just remember the two times that you and I have worked with each other at Worlds. I'm just you're squatting or benching or deadlifting, and I'm just backstage holding your lip gloss. Just every attempt holding your lip gloss.
So I'm gonna take a second and jump back to the mental game a little bit, and I'm gonna ask what I think is a loaded question because I'm pretty sure I know the answer to it. But you train with some very very experienced, some as Tom would call name brand lifters. And I think myself as well, like when I started the sport, I trained with Jeff Butt and a lot of experienced lifters, and obviously my wife, Rhea. And I think that helps to prepare you mentally, because you kind of feed off of their energy, right? Mm-hmm. So what do you think about that? Like, does that help you being around that caliber of lifters?
Oh, absolutely. The first few meets I did here in Newfoundland, I didn't really have a coach, so I was kind of just running around like going crazy, and then I started to work with Tom, so I got to he handled me at a few meets, told me to stop being ridiculous at the first few meets where I was panicking, but then I actually got to handle him at a few meets, and I watched how he lifted and stayed super calm all the time, the same kind of emotion. There was never any panic or anything like that, so being around and seeing how they perform it's awesome, and it definitely teaches me a lot.
I think that's one thing that competition allows you to do is it allows you to really take control of your emotions, either like because it forces you to do that, or else you're just going to totally derail and not fall off and crash and burn, or because you put yourself in that position where if you want to get better, you have to have that emotional regulation to actually perform well and translate your numbers on the competition platform. So I think that's one thing that when you do compete over and over and over again, and when you surround yourself with lifters who have gained that control of their emotions, you kind of have that role model and you see how they execute, and it's just like clockwork. It's like clockwork. Every attempt is the same, and they don't get themselves too high, and they don't get themselves too low after a bad attempt, and it's just 9 attempts, just everything exactly the same.
Yeah, so it didn't take me long to realize I didn't need someone like smacking me and giving me whiplash to go out on the platform and execute a lift. It's all just kind of a mental game. So what you can do, just go out and do it. There's no need to hype up and get smack marks all over you to go out and be able to squat.
So can you tell us a little bit then about your meet day routine? So, what kind of competitor are you now, like in terms of how you are on game day, and what sorts of things do you need or require on game day for you to perform optimally?
On game day now, no matter what happens, I remain pretty calm. And it's something, I guess, that I learned with experience. I remember, I think it may have been my first nationals. I had cut weight that meet, and I walked back my first warm-out, and I said, that felt heavy. And Tom looked at me and said, don't ever say that in the warm-up room again. And I was like, okay, yes. That's fair. So now I know if I cut weight, I know how it feels. I know my warm-ups are going to feel a little sticky. They're going to feel heavy, but just keeping, I guess, all the negative comments, negative energy away, that's what I do. I like to be calm, drink water, eat pretzels. I don't let Tom go very far away from me on a meet day. So I'm not the competitor who puts headphones in and listens to music. I kind of just keep him at arm's length. We chat, talk about numbers, just kind of stay calm, and I just go out and do my warm-ups. He kind of takes care of all of it. It's pretty easy for me. I just sit there. He tells me when to do my warm-ups, when I kind of got to get ready to go out to the platform, and as long as I have lip gloss and I squeeze his hand before every lift, I'm good.
It's great to hear that you actually that it sounds like the role of a coach in your life, in your competitive life, is really important and valuable. And I just hosted a meet about a month ago, and there was 70 athletes in my meet that I hosted, and 60 out of the 70 athletes were brand new lifters. And I couldn't believe in this day and age in powerlifting, when there's so many powerlifting coaches out there, that how many athletes came to the meet so underprepared because they didn't have a coach and they thought they could kind of go to their first meet and do it on their own. And even just you at your level, it's like, well, every elite person needs somebody to be there on game day to actually take care of the small things and to reduce the stressors that happen. I also like how you said that, how because you've competed so often, you know that when you go to a competition, warm-ups are going to feel heavy. But that doesn't mean that doesn't mean that that's going to dictate what you do on the platform that day. And that's only something that you get from competing, where it's like, okay, yeah, these feel heavier, slightly heavier than they would in training, but guess what? That doesn't matter because I know I'm going to go out and smash on the platform. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's a mental game thing too. I mean, it may feel heavier, but you know what your legs and your body's capable of, so you kind of just got to be able to look past that it feels a little bit heavy and go out and do your thing.
I think what I liked you saying there was that Tom got after you for being negative, right? And I've coached a lot of people that I don't really know. I'm helping him at meets, and I really have a hard time coaching someone who's a really negative talker, right? Who talks, oh, this feels heavy. Oh, this is gonna feel heavy, but that's okay. Like I don't know even what to say to people when they talk like that, because I'm super the opposite, right?
Yeah, and I mean
it's all positive.
You're defeating yourself before you even go out there. Yeah. So now I'm like, that felt awesome, even though I'm like, oh my god. I remember at Nationals this year, like I did cut so much weight, so my last warm-up was, I don't know, 125 kilos, and I've done that for 10 in the gym, and I had to like really, really push, and Tom was like, how did that feel? And I'm sure he knew. He watched it. It was awful. And I was like, oh, that was a great lift. And then he made me open with 135, and I hardly stood up with it. And I have no idea how I did 143, because 135 I was like knees touching, grinding. But yeah, so even that day when it felt awful, I still tried to, stay positive and work with what we had. Yeah.
That's right, mine too. Like even competing there and they're taking a couple days off, like tapering, and you're not touching any heavy weights, and like that weight's gonna feel like heavy on your back, heavy in your hands, but like your legs and arms, like they're gonna be fresh to push that weight, right? It's just hard to separate that and not think of it being like super, super heavy and knowing that your body can push it.
And I don't want to play down. I was going to say, I don't want to play down the fact that I think it's important for people to be honest with themselves. If that last warm-up does feel heavy, maybe you should drop your opener and stuff. But if you have a coach there to watch it, like it's, I think...
Yeah, I think that comes down to depending on experience as well. Like with beginner lifters, if they come to you and say, oh, that felt really bad, then you may want to take their opinion into consideration. But elite lifters, if like maybe just misgrooved it or they know they have, then maybe you can be like, okay, yeah.
I put the trust in Tom for that. Even if it feels crappy, he's watching, and I think that he would know what to put in for an opener. Yeah. And if I miss my opener, I'll just blame him. So
that's right.
I want to just switch gears here, Stef, and I think one of the things that a lot of people are interested in knowing about you is how you train, and perhaps we could just get into just a little bit of detail in terms of your training template, and perhaps you could just talk about because the majority of lifters right now are classic lifters, and you've seen a lot of success on the classic side. So let's just talk about your classic training a little bit. When you are training for a classic meet, how does your training look like? Can you talk about maybe how your training looks like 12 weeks out from a meet and then moving into a competition? I think I know the answer because you trained with Tom, but how are your, what does your sort of training organization look like during the week? Are you doing lots of squats and power lifts and benches and deadlifts? Do you do some variations of those movements? What sorts of like volumes are you working with? I know that Tom kind of brags about the sorts of volumes that you're able to handle specifically. So can you talk a little bit about your training?
Yeah, for sure. So I train with Tom. So I listen most of the time, and I just follow the numbers that he gives me. And for us, I train the same way he does. So we concentrate on the 3 lifts. So we don't do a whole lot of accessory work at all, maybe some rows and triceps, but other than that, we concentrate on squats, bench, and deadlift. We don't really vary outside of that very often. So I guess a training week for me, on Mondays, I squat and bench. On Wednesdays, I do all 3. Saturdays is our heavy day, so we call that our team HAF day. So we have all the guys in there on Saturday. We kind of go heavier. And then a few more days a week, maybe 2 more days a week, I'll bench by myself. So I'm only squatting 2 to 3 times a week. I pull twice a week at the most, and bench maybe 4 times a week. For training volume, he actually doesn't dial it back for me at all because I'm a female, which I like. He doesn't handle me with kid gloves at all. So he gives me pretty much the same training intensity as all the guys get,
Cool.
which is great. And we, so I guess volume and number-wise what we do, I don't really know. But I know that we go sort of heavy for me on Saturdays mostly. So I can work up to what would probably be an opener for me at a meet and be able to do it for doubles and triples, and normally we'll do that on a Saturday. And it doesn't really take that much out of me. I'm not quite sure why. And I function well that way, going heavy once a week, not super heavy like to a max lift, but something that I'm capable of doing 2 or 3 reps with. Tom always uses form over failure, so he never gets me to fail at a rep in the gym, and we don't do that. I don't really remember the last time I missed a rep in the gym. So yeah, we just build on it from that. And with my training, I'm quite lucky to have him. It's very, very dynamic. So he doesn't give me a training plan that kind of outlines 4 or 8 weeks. We do kind of 1 week at a time, and we build on each week. And then he sends me a new set of numbers at the end of the week and builds on the week before. So
each week is kind of independent, and so you evaluate each week and make sure that the numbers going into the next week are reflective of what's happening. But you did say that you do go slightly heavier at least once a week on all 3 lifts. Is that something you do like 12 weeks out from a meet? Every kind of Saturday moving into a meet, you would work up to those doubles and triples of something that's heavier?
For me, I do, because we've found with me that works. About a week out from a meet, we may touch on like where an opener would be for bench press and squat. I'd say probably I take maybe 8 to 10 days and don't deadlift at all before meet. But for bench and squat, we kind of work up to my openers even leading into a meet, and I'm fine with that. I know most people like to taper. I don't actually do much of a taper down, especially with squat and bench press. So my body works well, working up to almost my openers. Even the training day that we have, maybe 4 or 5 days out, I'm fine hitting my openers. It doesn't really take anything out of me. I'm much better. I think before it used to be a confidence thing. I wanted to hit the numbers that I was going to hit on the platform. So in South Africa, Abby can probably remember this. It was like one of the dumbest things that I've done. 2 days before I competed, I went to the gym and I did what was supposed to be my 3rd attempt squat for 3 singles in the gym. And I was like super excited. Went out to supper with Abby that night and I was like, I nailed those lifts for 3 attempts. And he was like, I'm pretty sure that Tom did not tell you to do that.
In fact,
I don't do that anymore.
As soon as that happened, I was texting Tom, and I was like, Tom, did you program this for Steph? He's like, no, I didn't program that for Steph. What is she doing? I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna mention it to Steph. I don't want her to get worked up. I'm just gonna pretend it's all normal right now.
Also, with all that being said, I missed that squat the day of the meet. Totally missed it. Didn't stand up. No, I did stand up. I caught it. But I'm not bad like that like I used to be. It's not a confidence thing for me anymore. It's just we know what my body's capable of and kind of how it works. So I work well with 1 heavy day a week. Doesn't really take much out of me training wise.
Yeah, and I think it just goes back to you found out what works for you, and everybody kind of has to figure out what works for them. I mean, that's one method where it can certainly work if you have the work capacity to recover from those sorts of lifts and to go back into training the following week and keep hammering away at the volume and doing those heavy workouts once a week, then that's something that you can do. I know that if I was to go in and do that same sort of methodology for even just bench press, I wouldn't be able to. My pecs wouldn't be able to handle it. I mean, I know we were making fun last week about being durable, but you're probably way more durable than me from a training standpoint than I am. I'm not that durable.
Yeah, and I mean, when we're further out from a meet, like right now, I don't have a meet for 20 some odd weeks, so we're hammering more heavy sets of 5s now. So we're doing reps of 5. Like if we were 4 to 6 weeks out from a meet, we would drop back and be doing triples and doubles, not sets of 5s, 6s, and 7s. To some degree, I taper off, but I taper off in reps rather than weight, if that makes any sense.
Gotcha. Yeah, Steph, I really want to thank you for coming on the podcast here. I think just hearing about your experience as an athlete has been so valuable. I know I've learned a couple things just from hearing you chat and your perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just tell us a little bit about your side business, which is Iron Body Works? Can you tell us a little bit about what that is and what you're doing and what you're going to be doing for some of our audience members?
Absolutely. So Iron Body Works, I actually created Iron Body Works about 2.5 years ago, and it was created because I seen a gap in the market of it's aimed at female fitness. I've seen a gap in the market for females wanting to get toned, and but they were doing so much cardio, not lifting, and on these calorie restricted diets. So I took in as much information as I could and as much knowledge as I could. Nutrition and the value of nutrition and actually fueling yourself properly, combined with a mixture of weight training and metabolic training. And so what I do is I program custom programs for females to tone up, lose weight, gain strength. I don't actually do much powerlifting coaching. And there's many reasons for that, and I've only been a powerlifter since 2013, so there's so much yet that I don't know. So I kind of stick to, regular conditioning and weight loss and just the everyday fitness enthusiast. So I do online programs, and I actually have classes and run my business out of a gym here in Newfoundland.
Cool. And you have some swag that you're going to be doing a giveaway for one of our listeners. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the swag?
I do. So I have Iron Body Works hoodies. They just have my logo on the front, and on the back it says Aspire to Inspire. And I have a pair of Iron Body Works leggings. So it says hashtag Raw Power down one leg and Iron Body Works down the other leg. That's
so cool, and we really appreciate you doing that for us. So if you want to enter into that draw, definitely go to our website, CanadianPowerliftingPodcast.com. Go to the contest section and enter your name. And Steph, before we let you go, we're gonna do the speed round. I don't know if you've listened to the podcast, you would know.
I have.
We have a speed round where we just want to ask you 5 quick questions. Give us the answer in a few short sentences. Cool?
Okay. Cool.
Here we go. Who is your favorite powerlifter?
Yeah, Tom Keene.
Tom Keene, hands down. I knew you were going to say that. Tell us something about Tom that none of us know. This is question 2.
Oh, God. I need more than 5 seconds. I think you're totally putting me on the spot. He's lifting conventional now?
Oh.
Really?
That's interesting.
I know. I should totally Instagram it because it even looks awkward because he's such a beautiful sumo deadlifter.
Number 3, who is a powerlifter to watch out for in the future? You can say Steve Cassioli.
I can. There was in the 52 class this year at Nationals. I didn't get to pay much attention kind of to what was going on because I was lifting. The girl who came third, I think her name was Cynthia Vaughn. She seems like she has a lot of potential as a powerlifter. She weighed in super light. She was like 49 kilos, and she had some pretty impressive lifts looking back through the numbers. So cool. We'll say her.
That's a name we'll watch out for. What was the best meet you've ever competed at?
I actually would have to say Easterns here in Newfoundland because Tom and I had the goal at that meet to get greatest lifter of all time. We reached our goal that meet. I don't have that title anymore. I lost it after, but it was one of those meets. We set a high goal and we got the goal, so that was my favorite meet. And you do it on your home stage, so that's pretty cool. And bonus question: do you think Avi Silverberg has the mobility to get into a front rack position to perform a front squat? I do. However, I think that we should see it on an Instagram video.
Agreed.
Oh, man, put me on the spot. Put me on the spot.
You'll never bench again. You'll never bench again.
I'm probably going to hurt my tricep doing it. Tear a tricep, never bench again.
We want to see this.
Well, Steph, we want to thank you for coming on the podcast. We know that a lot of our listeners will be really excited to hear you, and we want to wish you best of luck in your training, and we can't wait to follow your training and results moving into Equip Worlds. If somebody wants to find you on Instagram, where can they get a hold of you?
On Instagram, I think my Instagram name is StefPudd, StefPudd.
All right, so that's a wrap. Thanks, Steph, for coming on. I hope everyone finds this very informative. And Steph has a little giveaway for us. So we have some leggings and a hoodie from her company, Iron Body Works. So in order to win those, you have to go to our website under the contest tab and enter in there. And that's a wrap.
I hope I win the leggings.
I hope that you all enter and enjoy being powerlifters, and we'll see everybody next week. Goodbye.
This episode was brought to you by LVD Fitness, where LVD stands for Lift, Visualize, and Dominate. Visit lvdfitness.com to pick up your CPU-approved swag and follow them at LVD Fitness to find out which events they're coming to near you and to catch a sneak peek of their spring collection. You've been listening to the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast, the podcast that brings you the best of powerlifting in Canada, hosted by Stephen Cassioli, Ryan Stinn, and myself, Abby Silverberg. Please follow us on Instagram and check out our website for some great free powerlifting content at www.canadianpowerliftingpodcast.com. If you like what you heard today, please rate our podcast on iTunes and don't forget to listen to every other Thursday for a brand new episode.